A moment that seemed harmless turns into a nightmare when a cruel husband drags his pregnant wife into an abandoned house and lashes her exactly 100 times, while his mistress stands beside him, recording everything with a wicked smile. He believes no one is here, no cameras, no witnesses. But he has no idea the woman he is torturing is the daughter of the most powerful crime boss in the entire city. The moment the final lash hits her skin, her mother has already tracked the danger signal and is closing in fast. Justice is about to strike him harder and faster than anything he ever imagined. This is a story of violence, betrayal, and a courtroom reckoning that shakes the entire city. Tell me what time you are watching and where you are tuning in from. Drop a comment below. We always love hearing from you. The night was cold enough to make the air feel sharp, and the wind pushed through the broken roof of the abandoned house as if it wanted to tear the place open. The wind slipped through every cracked beam and every missing tile, whistling across the empty structure and filling it with a haunting chill. The house stood deep at the end of a road with no lights, a forgotten shell of decaying wood and concrete, where no one had stepped inside for years. Dead leaves and dirt covered the entrance, and the entire place felt like a trap made of silence. It was the last place anyone would expect to hear a human voice. Damien Holt approached the door with confidence and pulled from his pocket a key that had belonged to his family long ago. The metal scraped inside the lock with a harsh grinding sound that echoed through the hollow interior. The door creaked, then gave way with a heavy snap that sent dust drifting from the ceiling. Damien grabbed Lena Moretti by the wrist and dragged her inside. She walked unsteadily, her legs barely able to support the weight of her own fear and the weight of her pregnancy. She stumbled as he yanked her forward, and her breath trembled. Behind them, Roxy Vega followed with measured steps. Her eyes glinted with hatred, and her lips curled into a slow, satisfied smile. She watched Lena stumble into the darkness with obvious pleasure. Roxy lifted her hand and pushed the door shut with a hard slam. Dust fell from the rafters like thin clouds drifting through the stale air. Lena fell forward and hit the cold cement floor. The impact jolted her body, and she cried out softly while she curled her arms around her belly to protect her unborn child. The concrete was icy and rough under her palms. Her skin prickled as she tried to lift herself, but Damien stepped toward her and raised his flashlight. The beam flashed across her eyes with a glare that forced her to squint. His face was shadowed but clearly cold as he moved the light slowly from her face to her shoulders and down her trembling arms. Damien turned away and walked to the far corner of the room, where broken planks leaned against each other. He reached behind them with an ease that proved he had been here before. Lena felt a sick drop in her stomach as she heard leather shifting. Damien pulled out a whip he had hidden earlier. He held it for a moment, letting the leather fall loosely from his hand. The sound of it sliding across the floor made Lena inhale sharply. Roxy folded her arms and watched with a cruel smile growing on her face. She leaned slightly to the side as if positioning herself for a better view, and her eyes stayed fixed on Lena with unblinking interest. She did not ask Damien to stop. She did not show even a flicker of hesitation. Her silence was approval. Damien stepped back toward Lena with a cold certainty. His grip tightened around the handle of the whip. Without giving Lena a moment to speak or beg, he lifted his arm and brought the whip down for the first time. The crack rang so loudly that it sliced the air inside the hollow room. The leather struck Lena across her back, and she jerked forward with a gasp. Her body curled protectively as she tried to shield her belly. A shiver ran through her spine as the pain spread. He struck her again. The second blow landed with the same brutal force. Then a third. The sound of leather hitting skin echoed again and again, bouncing off the empty walls. Lena crawled forward instinctively, trying to get away, but there was nowhere to go. The abandoned house offered no corner safe from the rage in Damien's eyes. Roxy stepped closer. Her heels crunched against broken tiles and bits of glass. She tilted her head slightly, as if she wanted to memorize every detail of Lena's suffering. The corner of her mouth lifted into a smile that made the room feel even colder. Lena's arms trembled violently. Her breathing grew uneven, each breath catching painfully in her throat. She tried to sit up, but Damien brought the whip down again. The house groaned under the weight of the violence, and dust drifted from the ceiling beams. Lena's tears blurred her vision, and she whispered a quiet plea that her baby would survive. The strikes continued. Damien's face turned red, not from exhaustion, but from a dark excitement that made each blow harder than the last. His wrist snapped with practiced cruelty. The whip marked Lena's back again and again. Red lines appeared like streaks of fire across her skin. She shook as the pain spread down her sides. The abandoned house felt suffocating. The smell of mold mixed with the sharp metallic scent of fresh blood. Lena gasped, her voice nearly silent. Her hands clutched her belly, and she whispered through trembling lips while her body shook from pain. Her hair clung to her face with sweat and tears. Damien delivered more blows, each timed with a cold rhythm. Roxy stepped even closer, fascinated. Lena's breathing grew weaker, and her body shook uncontrollably. Her vision wavered. She felt herself slipping toward darkness, but refused to let go. She curled tighter around her unborn child. The whip came down again. Her body jerked again. Damien struck her the 100th time. The sound echoed like the crack of a bone. Lena let out a broken cry, and her body collapsed fully onto the cement floor. Her cheek pressed against the cold surface. Her arms folded tightly around her stomach. Her breath came in thin, fragile bursts. Her body trembled in pain and fear. Damien lowered the whip at last. He looked down at Lena with no remorse. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, but his eyes remained void of humanity. Roxy stood beside him, her expression filled with cruel satisfaction. She stared at Lena as if admiring the result of a deliberate act. Lena lay motionless, her breath thin and unsteady. Her back throbbed, her muscles trembled, and her tears soaked into the dust on the floor. Her entire world narrowed to the simple effort of breathing. Her body curled around her baby, guarding what little she could still protect. The abandoned house swallowed her pain and echoed the last faint sound she managed to make. In the thick and suffocating darkness, the only thing that remained was the weak, fading sound of Lena Moretti's exhausted breathing inside the ruined house. The cold cement floor pressed against Lena Moretti's cheek as she lay on her side, her body shaking from the pain tearing across her back. Blood had begun to seep through the torn fabric of her shirt, tracing thin lines along her skin. Every breath felt like a struggle. Each inhale burned. Each exhale trembled. Her vision flickered between clarity and darkness as she tried to hold on. She did not dare move too much. She feared any shift might harm the child she was still trying desperately to protect. Damien Holt walked toward her with slow, measured steps. His boots scraped against the floor, leaving behind small trails of dust. He reached her side and nudged her leg with the tip of his shoe. It was not a kick meant to injure. It was a cold test to see if she still had the strength to react. Lena flinched weakly. That was enough for him. He exhaled sharply and straightened, his expression unreadable in the dim light of the flashlight he held. Lena tried to lift her head. Her muscles trembled and failed. Her arms shook as she attempted to push herself up, but she could only manage a slight lift before collapsing again. A soft sound escaped her throat, somewhere between a whimper and a gasp. She tasted dust and fear on her tongue. Roxy Vega crouched beside her with a smile that made the room feel even colder. She leaned forward to examine the wounds that covered Lena's back. The gashes were red and raw, some swelling already forming beneath the skin. Roxy tilted her head as if she were inspecting a piece of damaged artwork. Her eyes glimmered with amusement. She let out a breathy laugh. "She is still alive," Roxy said with casual delight. Her voice echoed lightly through the empty house. Damien responded with a low, cold chuckle. The sound vibrated in the air like something rotten. He lifted the flashlight and scanned the room lazily, as though searching for something to occupy himself with, while Lena lay trembling on the floor. The wind outside grew stronger. It pushed through the broken windows with a violent howl. Wooden boards clattered softly as the house reacted to the gusts. The thin glass shards around the window panes rattled. The sound filled the hollow space with an eerie vibration. The air grew colder with every gust. Lena curled her arms tighter around her belly. Her instincts guided her more than her strength. She tried to block out the pain rising along her spine. She tried to steady her breathing so she would not faint. The wind moved across her skin, making her shiver more violently. Damien walked in a slow circle around her, watching her like a predator, observing prey that had no chance of escape. His flashlight beam shifted across the dusty floor, revealing broken boards, rusted nails, and shattered fragments of tile. Every few steps, he paused, as if considering something, though he did not say what. His shadow stretched across the wall, long and distorted, moving each time he took a step. Roxy lifted her phone. She positioned the camera and snapped several photos without shame or hesitation. The shutter sound echoed cruelly in the hollow room. Lena's breath caught in her throat. Even with her vision blurred, she could see the flash of Roxy's smile. The cold floor shook her bones. Her legs trembled beneath her. She pressed her palms into the ground, but her fingers shook so badly she could not support even a small part of her weight. She rolled onto her back instinctively as Damien approached again, and the movement made her wince with pain. The wounds burned intensely. Damien stopped beside her and used the tip of his shoe to lift her chin slightly. His flashlight beam illuminated her face fully. Her cheeks were wet with tears. Her eyes were glossy and swollen. She looked away from the beam, trying to avoid meeting his gaze. Her reaction seemed to amuse him. Roxy laughed again at the terrified expression on Lena's face. Her laughter mixed with the sound of the rattling windows and the restless wind. The abandoned house swallowed the sound and sent it echoing across the cracked walls. The atmosphere felt like a cruel stage, where Lena was trapped in a role she never chose. The wind continued to push against the building. The old wooden boards of the window frames thumped under the pressure. A loose piece of glass clinked repeatedly against its frame. The hollow room amplified each sound, creating a constant reminder that the night outside was just as merciless as the moment inside. Roxy stepped closer and tapped the side of Lena's face lightly with her shoe. Maybe he should give her a few more hits, she suggested. Her tone was almost playful. Lena's breath hitched. She curled into herself even more. Her arms wrapped around her stomach with shaking desperation. Her body moved like someone trying to disappear into the concrete. Damien's gaze shifted between Roxy and Lena. He did not answer the suggestion, but he did not dismiss it either. He simply stood there, breathing slowly, while he studied Lena with a calculating expression. The flashlight beam wavered slightly as his grip shifted. He seemed lost in his thoughts, as if deciding what he wanted to do next. Lena lay there trembling. Fear pulsed through her in violent waves. She pressed her knees closer to her chest, but could not fully curl up. Pain shot along her back each time her muscles tightened. Tears slid down her cheek and pooled on the cold floor. She looked up at the ceiling. The rotten wood above her sagged under years of neglect. Dust drifted down in thin lines. The house groaned with each gust of wind, as if warning her that it might collapse at any second. The cold seeped deeper into her bones. Roxy moved around the room, taking more photos. Each flash of the camera froze Lena's fear like a cruel painting. The room grew darker between flashes, and the air felt heavier with each passing second. Damien remained silent, his mind working in shadows. He did not leave. He did not claim he was done. He simply watched and considered. Lena felt the tension rising again, twisting the air around them. She curled even tighter on the floor. Her breath hitched. Her trembling grew worse. She held her belly as if her hands alone could shield her child from everything happening. Outside, the night deepened. The darkness clung to the windows like a living thing. The cold grew sharper. The abandoned house creaked and groaned under the force of the wind. Inside, Lena fought the growing despair. She did not know how long she had been lying there. She did not know what Damien or Roxy would decide next. She only knew that the night was far from over, and no one had come for her yet. Her heart pounded slowly, weakened by pain. Her fingers twitched as she clung to consciousness. She remained on the floor, shaking, bleeding, and terrified. She listened to the footsteps of Damien as he moved again. She listened to Roxy's amused breaths. She listened to the cold wind and the angry rumble of the house. She did not know that somewhere far away, someone was beginning to notice her absence. For now, inside the abandoned house, Lena Moretti breathed in agony as the dark night pressed in around her. Cassandra Moretti sat alone in her private study, surrounded by soft golden light from a single lamp on her desk. The room was quiet, and the city noise outside felt far away. She had always been a woman who trusted her instincts more than anything else. Tonight, something inside her refused to settle. She lifted her wrist and tapped the screen of the small tracking interface connected to her daughter's pregnancy bracelet. A detailed map appeared, showing Lena's location as a glowing red dot. The dot had not moved. Cassandra narrowed her eyes and zoomed in. The signal was deep inside a remote industrial zone, in the same cluster of abandoned structures she had forbidden Lena from visiting. Her pulse slowed, not with fear, but with cold calculation. The dot remained still for too long. A pregnant woman should not be motionless for this long in a deserted place. Cassandra studied the coordinates again, and a chill crawled up her spine. The abandoned zone had once belonged to the Holt family. She knew the history. She knew the reputation. The entire area was a nest of old secrets, and none of them were good. She stared at the screen, her expression frozen, as she realized the meaning behind the stillness. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. She tapped the screen again, expecting the red dot to shift even a little. It did not. Her jaw tightened. She pressed the button to call Lena's phone. The call rang for 1 second, then stopped abruptly. The signal went dark. The device was powered off. For a moment, the silence in the room deepened, as if even the air understood the danger before she fully spoke it aloud. Cassandra shot to her feet. The chair rolled back behind her. Her eyes filled with a fierce, lethal intensity that only appeared when someone threatened her family. The softness of the room vanished from her mind. Only the still red dot remained. She walked quickly across the room to a large screen on the wall and activated her private surveillance network. Cassandra owned one of the largest and most powerful intelligence webs in the city. Cameras from shops, street corners, warehouses, and high-level access points appeared in neat rows. She typed the coordinates from Lena's bracelet into the system. The cameras closest to that area loaded on the screen. She selected one angle from a traffic pole at the entrance of the industrial road. The footage rewound. A dark SUV came into focus. The headlights illuminated old metal fences and rusted signs. She recognized the vehicle immediately. It was Damien Holt's. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. She moved to the next camera. The same SUV appeared, turning toward the abandoned buildings. A phone on her desk rang. She answered instantly. "Boss," a loyal subordinate said. His voice was steady, but Cassandra heard urgency under it. "We spotted Damien Holt's SUV entering the old factory zone, same direction as the signal. He is not alone." Cassandra closed her eyes for 1 second, and when she opened them again, the softness was gone. She did not need more information. She already understood everything. "He went into the abandoned houses," the subordinate continued. "He stayed there. No one else has come out." The truth solidified inside her. Her daughter was in danger. She did not need proof. Instinct alone was enough. But she had proof. And that was far worse. "We move now," Cassandra said. Her voice was low, sharp, and absolute. She ended the call and strode toward the hallway. "Silas," she called. Her voice carried through the mansion. Silas Grant, her chief bodyguard, appeared immediately at the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, and always alert, he read her expression before she even spoke. "Prepare the car," she ordered. "We are leaving immediately." "Yes, ma'am." "Nolan Pierce comes with us. Full protection protocol." Silas nodded sharply and disappeared down the hall. Cassandra walked to the foyer and picked up a set of keys from a carved stone table. The keys shone with gold casing, heavy enough to symbolize authority. She curled her fingers around them tightly, as if gripping a weapon. She stepped into her coat, not even bothering to button it. Her movements were precise and fast. She had no time to think of fear. Thought alone would slow her down. Her mind focused only on the red dot that still sat unmoving on the map. She replayed the video of Damien's SUV in her mind as she walked down the steps. The image sharpened her resolve. She would tear down the entire abandoned zone brick by brick if she had to. She would burn every structure to the ground if anyone had touched Lena. Outside, the night was harsh. The air bit at her cheeks as she approached the armored SUV waiting in the driveway. Silas held the back door open. Nolan Pierce stood near the front, checking the weapons and equipment loaded inside. Both men were dressed in tactical gear and ready for anything. They knew Cassandra did not give orders lightly. When she called for a full emergency protocol, it meant someone had crossed a line that should never be crossed. Cassandra paused for a brief moment beside the open door. She looked once more at the glowing red dot on her device. It blinked steadily, still unmoving. Anger flooded her chest, cold and heavy. "Move!" she said. Silas entered behind her. Nolan closed the door and climbed into the front passenger seat. The gates of the mansion began to open automatically, responding to the emergency command. Cassandra leaned back in the seat as the SUV rolled forward. Her fingers tightened around the keys again. The convoy of vehicles behind them adjusted into formation. Engines rumbled to life. The headlights cut through the darkness like twin blades. The security team drove with a speed that ignored hesitation. Cassandra watched the road ahead, with eyes filled, not with fear, but with fury. Her daughter needed her. And Cassandra Moretti did not fail the people she loved. The SUV accelerated down the long driveway, and as the gates closed behind them, the fleet of vehicles pushed into the night, heading straight toward the abandoned house where Lena was being held. The headlights sliced through the darkness, determined and unforgiving, rushing toward the place where danger waited. Damian Holt stepped toward Lena Moretti again, the leather whip still clutched in his hand. The dim beam from his flashlight swung across the cracked floor as he moved, catching specks of dust floating in the cold air. His shadow stretched over Lena's small, curled form. Her breathing was shallow, and her shoulders trembled each time the draft from the broken windows touched her skin. Damian's footsteps sounded heavy and deliberate. Every movement he made carried the same dark intention that had filled the room earlier. Roxy Vega watched him with a crooked smile, enjoying the scene as if it were entertainment. "Finish teaching her the lesson," she said. Her tone was sharp with eagerness. The words echoed off the walls, slipping into the empty corners of the house. Damian glanced back at her, and the approval in her eyes only fueled him more. Lena tried to move away, dragging herself backward until her spine pressed against the cold concrete wall. Her muscles trembled from the pain. She had almost no strength left. Her hands clawed weakly at the floor as she tried to create distance, but her body could not obey her desperation. Her knees shook violently as she attempted to pull them closer, searching for some scrap of protection. The darkness around her made the room feel even smaller. Damian reached her in one stride. He leaned down without hesitation and grabbed a fistful of her hair. His fingers tangled roughly through the strands, and he yanked her head upward with cruel force. The pain shot through her scalp and down into her spine. She let out a cry that bounced around the empty room. Her neck strained under the pull, and she felt her vision blur, turning the edges of everything into a haze. Roxy lifted her phone with excitement. She moved closer, holding the device at just the right angle to capture Lena's pain. Her fingers tapped the screen as she began recording. The glow from the phone's light illuminated Lena's tear-streaked face and the hand that clutched her belly. The sight seemed to amuse Roxy even more. She smirked while adjusting the focus. Lena tried to push Damian away. Her hands pressed against his arm, but her strength was almost gone. Her palms slid down uselessly as her body failed her. She could only shake as she attempted to shield herself. Damian did not move at all. He did not even seem to feel her attempts. He lifted his arm slowly, raising the whip high above his shoulder. The movement created a soft whistle in the air. "Please," Lena whispered through her sobs. Her voice cracked painfully. "Please. The baby." Her words were faint and broken, but they reached the ears of both Damian and Roxy. Instead of softening, Roxy laughed with mockery. She tilted her head and said, "The baby? And who does she think the father is?" The cruelty in her voice filled the space like a toxin. Lena froze from the emotional blow. The words pierced deeper than the pain in her back. Her chest tightened with anguish. She stared at the floor, her breathing unsteady. She felt something inside her collapse. For a moment, she forgot even the whip poised above her. She only felt the ache of betrayal. Damien nodded slowly, acknowledging Roxy's taunt. His expression hardened in agreement, and he tightened his grip on the whip. He shifted his weight as he prepared for another strike. His breath deepened, fueled by the same anger and satisfaction that had driven the earlier blows. The tension in the room thickened. Outside, the wind pushed against the old wooden frames. Suddenly, the door rattled violently. The noise hit the house like a warning. A loud, heavy bang shook the air, followed by another. The wind forced the broken shutters to slam against the wall. Damien paused for only a fraction of a second, but he did not lower the whip. Lena shrank down and brought her arms to her head. She curled into the smallest shape she could manage, waiting for the blow she knew would come. Her fingers trembled uncontrollably. Her lips moved in silent fear. She pressed her knees together and covered her face as much as her shaking arms allowed. The cold air sliced through the room and rushed over her exposed skin. Damien inhaled deeply, preparing himself. His chest rose slowly, and the anticipation seemed to send a shiver of excitement through him. His hand tightened around the handle. His wrist twitched slightly with the rush of adrenaline. His eyes gleamed with a cruel spark. He looked ready to strike with even more force than before. Roxy stepped back a few inches to get a clearer shot of the moment. She repositioned herself, making sure the camera captured both Damien's raised whip and Lena's trembling form. Her smile widened as she watched the scene unfold. She bit her lip in anticipation, leaning slightly to the side as if she did not want to miss any detail. The house creaked beneath them. The old floorboards trembled faintly. A small vibration moved through the ground, subtle but unmistakable. Dust drifted down from the ceiling beams and swirled slowly in the air. Damien felt the shift under his feet but brushed it off. His focus was fixed entirely on Lena. He lifted the whip even higher, his arm stretched above his shoulder. His stance widened to deliver a harder blow. The tip of the whip cast a long shadow against the wall. His breathing grew heavier as he prepared to strike. And then, a loud, sharp noise exploded from the front of the house. It was not the wind this time, it was something heavier. Something direct. The impact shook the door, sending a forceful tremor through the room. Damien's head snapped toward the sound. Roxy's recording stopped mid-frame. For a split second, the three of them froze, suspended in shock. The noise came again, this time louder. The abandoned house vibrated as if something powerful had slammed into the door. The sudden interruption cut sharply through the tension, slicing the moment in half and forcing every eye to turn toward the entrance. The abandoned house shook violently as the front door exploded inward. The sound crashed through the room like a shockwave. Rotten wood fractured and flew in splinters across the floor. The hinges ripped free and clattered against the wall. For a moment, the air was filled with the echo of the impact. The darkness inside the house shuddered as if it had been forced awake. A sudden burst of white light followed. The beams from the bodyguard's flashlights swept across the room with blinding force. The dim and dirty interior transformed instantly under the bright glare. Every crack in the walls and every floating particle of dust became clear. The lights cut through the darkness as sharply as blades. The door frame groaned as dust rose in a thick cloud. It swirled upward and drifted around the entryway like smoke. Footsteps followed, heavy and sure. Through the doorway, Cassandra Moretti stepped inside. She moved with a calm and controlled power, the kind of authority that came from years of commanding entire sectors of the city. Her presence alone changed the temperature of the room. She entered like a cold storm. Her eyes adjusted quickly to the harsh beams of the flashlights. The moment she saw Lena curled near the far wall, her gaze froze. Lena was trembling as she held her stomach, her body bent protectively over the child she carried. Cassandra's expression shifted. It was not surprise. It was not confusion. It was a deep, simmering fury that rose from the bottom of her chest. "Mama?" Lena's voice broke as tears spilled down her face. She tried to lift herself, but her legs trembled so badly that she sank back to the ground. Her arms curled around her belly again. Silas Grant and Nolan Pierce slipped into the room behind Cassandra. The two men immediately spread out in opposite directions. Their steps were silent, but their presence unmistakable. They moved with trained precision, each taking a strategic position on either side of the room to block any possible escape. Their flashlights swept over Damien Holt and Roxy Vega. Roxy backed away until her shoulders hit the wall. The color drained from her face. She held her phone tightly as if it were a shield, but her fingers trembled. Her confidence evaporated. She could not look Cassandra in the eyes. Damien did not move. His body stiffened as his brain tried to process what he was seeing. The whip hung loosely at his side, forgotten for the moment. His breath caught in his throat. True fear flickered through his expression for the first time that night. The realization that Cassandra had found them hit him with crushing force. "What are you doing here?" he asked. The question came out hollow and foolish. Even he seemed to hear it. Cassandra did not answer him. She did not even look in his direction. Instead, she walked straight toward Lena. Each step she took was steady and deliberate. Dust lifted beneath her heels and drifted behind her like a faint trail. She reached her daughter and crouched down carefully. Lena leaned against her instantly, her face buried in Cassandra's shoulder. Cassandra brushed Lena's hair back with gentle fingers. Then she looked at the wounds across Lena's back. Angry red welts covered her skin. Some of them were swollen, others were bleeding openly. Cassandra's jaw clenched. Her eyes began to shimmer, not with sorrow, but with a deeper, more dangerous emotion. 100 lashes, she whispered. The words were soft, but the coldness in her tone sliced through the air like metal. Damien heard it clearly. His face tightened. His feet shifted backward without him even realizing it. Instinct alone was guiding him. Something inside him recognized the danger. Roxy stared at the floor. She did not dare look at Cassandra. She did not dare move. Lena clung to her mother's arm as she tried to stand. Cassandra supported her, wrapping an arm firmly around her shoulders. Lena pushed through the pain and rose with effort, her legs trembling under her weight. Her tears soaked into Cassandra's sleeve as she tried to catch her breath. Cassandra lifted her head and gave a small, precise signal with her hand. It was nothing more than a single motion, but Silas and Nolan responded instantly. They moved at the same moment. Silas stepped forward with controlled power, aiming directly for Damien. Nolan mirrored him, closing in from the opposite angle. Their movements were sharp and unified. The air in the abandoned house tightened like a pulled wire. And then the room erupted as they charged. Silas Grant moved first. His steps were sharp and fast, driven by precision rather than aggression. In one swift motion, he reached Damien Holt and grabbed both of the man's arms. His hands locked around Damien's wrists with practiced strength. The moment Silas made contact, Damien's muscles tightened in panic. Silas twisted his arms behind his back with firm control. Damien opened his mouth to shout, but the sound came out broken as Silas forced his arms higher until the whip dropped from Damien's fingers and hit the ground with a dull slap. Nolan Pierce stepped in at the exact same second. He lowered his weight and drove Damien downward with one decisive movement. Damien's knees buckled. Nolan pushed harder, forcing Damien's chest forward until his face slammed inches away from the cold cement floor. The impact echoed through the empty house. Damien gasped as the pressure on his back intensified. His cheek pressed against the dirty concrete. Dust rose around his face as he struggled to lift his head. The whip lay beside him, its leather curled loosely on the ground like a discarded serpent. His fingers twitched as if he considered reaching for it, but Silas's grip prevented any attempt. The weapon that had dominated the room moments before now lay forgotten beside a man who could no longer lift his arms. A sharp cry erupted near the corner. Roxy Vega tried to run, but the moment she moved, two additional guards who had followed Silas and Nolan into the house stepped in front of her. She screamed, the sound sharp and frantic. Her voice cracked as one guard seized her wrist. Another grabbed her other arm. They pinned her in place with no effort at all. Her phone slipped from her hand and clattered across the floor. "Let go of me!" she shrieked. She kicked wildly, her heels scraping against the floor. Her voice shook with fear she could no longer hide. Silas tightened his hold on Damien. "Do not move," he warned in a low voice. His tone did not need to rise. His strength and authority said enough. Damien twisted his shoulders, trying desperately to break free, but he could not. He struggled with short bursts of frantic motion, his breath growing louder and more frantic. "You have no right!" he shouted. His voice rose into an uncontrolled yell. "You have no right to touch me!" Nolan pressed his palm firmly between Damien's shoulder blades. The pressure increased. Damien's words dissolved into a grunt of pain. His legs kicked weakly, but he could no longer find leverage. Nolan's weight kept him pinned as effectively as iron bars. Cassandra Moretti stood only a few steps away. She did not interfere. She did not show emotion. She stood with a stillness that made her presence even more intimidating. The dim light from the bodyguard's flashlights illuminated her face, carving sharp shadows across her features. Her silence was heavier than any threat. "Unlock his phone," she said calmly. Silas shifted Damien's arms even higher, forcing him to wince. "Unlock it," Silas ordered. Damien glared up at him with fury. His jaw clenched. He shook his head, refusing. But Silas pressed his arms harder until Damien inhaled sharply from the pain. The phone was placed in front of his face. The screen lit up. Damien trembled. His eyes darted toward Cassandra. Her gaze did not soften. He finally gave in. The phone unlocked. Silas picked it up and scrolled through the files. It took only seconds for the video to appear. The screen displayed the recording clearly. 100 lashes. Every blow, every scream, every moment that had torn through Lena's back. The sound played low. The room filled with the faint, haunting crack of the whip. Damien turned his head away from the screen. His breath shook. Cassandra watched without blinking. Her eyes reflected the light from the screen. When she saw Roxy on the video mocking Lena, her face hardened further. The cold fury in her eyes deepened. "Accomplice," Cassandra said. Her voice was untouched by emotion. It was a verdict, a confirmation, a final judgment. Roxy burst into tears. The sobs ripped from her chest and shook her entire body. "I did not mean," she cried. "I did not mean any of it." She tried to twist her wrists free, but the guards held her firmly. Her words came out broken and desperate. She knew the truth. She did not deny it. She could not. The video exposed everything. "Please," Roxy gasped. "Please." I was scared. Her voice dissolved into a frantic whimper. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her eyes looked wild. The guards did not loosen their grip. Silas pulled out a pair of metal cuffs. He snapped them onto Damien's wrists with a loud click. The sound echoed through the room. Damien's breath stuttered. His panic intensified now that the reality of the situation was sinking into him. Nolan grabbed another pair of cuffs and locked them tightly around Roxy's shaking wrists. She gasped when the cold metal closed around her skin. Her tears fell faster. Her body sagged under the weight of her terror. Damien's composure collapsed. His voice dropped into a breathless panic. "Wait," he said. "You cannot do this. You cannot take me." His voice cracked. "I did not mean. I was only angry. I did not mean for it to go that far. Please." His words only proved his fear. Nolan pulled him to his feet with one hard motion. Damien stumbled. Dust kicked up from the floor. Silas did the same with Roxy. She cried out, her legs barely moving. The guards forced her forward while she trembled uncontrollably. Cassandra finally turned toward them. Her expression remained unreadable. "Take them to the cars," she commanded. "Yes, ma'am," Silas said. Nolan tilted his head in acknowledgement. They dragged Damien and Roxy through the doorway. The flashlights illuminated the path as they moved, casting long shadows across the broken floor. The sound of their footsteps filled the room. The cries, the pleas, the desperate breaths, all faded into the darkness outside as the group disappeared into the night. The abandoned house grew silent once more. Dust drifted slowly through the air. The cold wind slipped back into the room through the broken windows. The stillness returned, heavy and suffocating. For the first time since the violence began, the house stood quiet. The abandoned house had fallen quiet again, but Lena Moretti could still feel the echoes of everything that had happened inside its decaying walls. The air was cold, and the faint smell of dust and blood drifted upward each time she breathed. Her back throbbed with deep, burning pain, but something inside her refused to collapse. She felt her mother's arm around her, firm and steady. Lena pushed her hands against the floor. Her muscles trembled, but she tried to sit up. Cassandra immediately leaned down and supported her. one arm behind her shoulders, the other holding her steady as Lena slowly rose. The movement felt like lifting herself out of the weight of the entire night. Her breath shook as she fought against the pain. She placed her hand on her stomach, her palm barely steady. She waited for any sign, any shift, any reassurance. Her fingers pressed gently, and she exhaled in relief as she felt a faint, reassuring response from within. Her eyes filled with emotion as she held her hand there. "I want to tell everything," Lena whispered. Her voice cracked, but she managed to speak with determination. She turned to her mother, and despite her tears, there was a cold fire growing inside her. Cassandra nodded, her expression softening for the first time that night. She brushed a stray lock of hair away from Lena's face. "You will?" she said. Her voice was steady and certain. Silas Grant stepped closer. He had removed his coat earlier to move freely, but now he took it and gently draped it over Lena's shoulders. The heavy fabric settled around her like a shield. The warmth of it eased the chill that had seeped deep into her bones. Lena pulled it tighter as she slowly rose to her feet. Her legs shook with the effort. Her breaths came in shallow waves, but she stood. She stood using every last bit of strength she had left. Cassandra kept her hand at Lena's back, guiding her, supporting her, ensuring she did not fall. Lena lifted her gaze. She looked down at the floor where she had bled, cried, and trembled through her nightmare. The stains of her blood darkened the cement. The cracked surface beneath her feet held the imprint of the torture she endured. For a long moment, she simply stared. Then, her expression shifted. Her eyes sharpened. Her jaw tightened. Something inside her changed from fear to resolve. Cassandra watched her daughter silently. When Lena's expression transformed, Cassandra reached out and squeezed her hand. Lena squeezed back, her grip weak but full of meaning. Together, they turned toward the entrance. For the first time since she had been dragged inside the abandoned building, Lena took a step toward freedom. The cold air brushed against her face as she moved, but it no longer frightened her. The wind felt like a reminder that she was alive. She was breathing. She was still fighting. The night outside was dark and cold, but Nolan Pierce and Silas flanked her immediately. Silas walked on her right, close enough to catch her if she faltered. Nolan walked on her left, scanning every shadow with protective vigilance. Their presence created a shield around her, blocking the memories of the pain behind her. Lena stepped out of the doorway. The broken threshold scraped against her bare feet, but she did not stop. She walked past the shattered remains of the door that Cassandra had broken through. The wind pressed gently against the coat Silas had given her. Each breath she drew felt clearer than the one before. She moved toward the SUV parked outside. Its headlights illuminated the surrounding darkness. The beam cut across the dirt and the uneven ground. The engine hummed softly, ready and waiting. Cassandra stayed close, guiding her daughter toward the open door. Lena reached out and placed her hand on the frame for support as she climbed inside. Cassandra slid in beside her, sitting close enough for their shoulders to touch. She took both of Lena's hands into her own. The warmth from her mother's palms steadied her. Cassandra held her tightly and said, "You will never return to this hell." Lena nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The pain lingered in her back, but the weight in her chest felt lighter. Her mother's words sank deep into her, reinforcing her resolve. Outside, Silas closed the door carefully. Nolan moved to the front seat. He exchanged a quick look with Silas before taking his place. Silas then walked around the vehicle and climbed into the driver's seat. His movements were steady and controlled. The engine grew louder as he started the vehicle. The headlights brightened the road ahead. The SUV rolled forward, carrying Lena away from the place she had suffered. Cassandra continued to hold her daughter's hands, anchoring her in safety. As the SUV moved down the narrow dirt path, Lena looked through the window. The abandoned house grew smaller behind them. The broken walls and shattered windows became faint shadows, swallowed by the night. For a moment, she simply watched it disappear. The fear she once felt there faded slowly from her mind. The darkness in the rear window shifted. The farther they drove, the less she saw of the abandoned structure. Soon, it was nothing but a smudge swallowed by the wind and night. She exhaled. Her tears dried. The final remnants of the terror she had endured slipped into the background as the vehicle continued forward. The shadows outside gave way to the faint light from the SUV's interior. Lena leaned back against the seat. Her eyes drifted closed for a brief moment. She let herself breathe deeply. Each inhale brought her closer to safety. Each exhale pushed the trauma a bit farther away. The cold outside no longer touched her. She was surrounded by her mother's presence, by Silas's steady driving, by Nolan's silent vigilance. These were the people who protected her. These were the people who would make sure no harm reached her again. The SUV turned onto another path. The headlights illuminated the bend ahead. The vehicle tilted slightly as the tires rolled over uneven ground. The night grew quieter, and as the car turned toward the route leading deeper into Cassandra's secure territory, a new path opened before them. The old darkness was gone behind them. A new hope began to rise. The headlights swept across the road, leading them toward the safe haven waiting ahead. The SUV rolled through the heavy steel gates of Cassandra Moretti's private compound. The headlights swept across the tall concrete walls that surrounded the property, revealing the guards standing along the perimeter with alert eyes and firm posture. As the vehicle came to a stop near the main building, the cold night air settled around them. Silas stepped out first. Nolan followed. Cassandra slid out next, supporting Lena carefully. Every movement was deliberate, protective, and urgent. Inside the compound, the lights were brighter and warmer. The tension of the abandoned house slowly faded as Lena was led inside. They moved into a sterile, well-equipped medical room. A doctor in a white coat hurried in when Cassandra signaled him. He carried a portable fetal monitor and placed it beside the examination bed. "Lie down slowly," the doctor instructed. Silas and Nolan helped Lena ease onto the bed. The doctor lifted her shirt gently and placed the cold gel and the probe on her abdomen. The room grew still as everyone waited. Cassandra stood near the bed, her eyes fixed on the monitor. A faint sound started to fill the room. A rhythmic thump, then another. The heartbeat, soft, steady, fragile, but alive. "The baby's heartbeat is stable," the doctor said. Lena covered her mouth with a shaking hand. Tears spilled instantly down her cheeks. She exhaled as if she had been holding her breath for the entire night. Relief washed over her so strongly that her body trembled. Cassandra placed a firm hand on her daughter's shoulder. The gesture was small, but it held deep reassurance. Silas entered the room again, carrying a secure evidence box. He set it on the wide table near the wall and opened it. Inside were several items collected from the abandoned house. The whip, the phone Roxy had dropped, the device Damien had used, bits of rope from the corner. Everything was handled with gloves. Nolan walked in behind him. He carried Damien's phone. Its screen was cracked, but still functional. He placed it next to the other evidence. Roxy Vega had already confessed everything earlier when the guards restrained her. Now, escorted by police outside the medical wing, her words had been recorded. Every detail she had tried to hide before spilled out. Every previous incident, every message, every act. Cassandra's team documented it all with cold, methodical efficiency. On the table, the evidence was organized piece by piece. The lawyer Cassandra trusted arrived quickly, wearing a dark suit and carrying a laptop. He reviewed each video file, each photo, each message. The room was silent, except for the soft clicking of keys and the occasional low sound from the monitors. After several minutes, the lawyer looked up. His face carried a grave certainty. "This is more than enough to put him away for a long time," he said. His words made Lena inhale deeply. Her eyes filled again, but this time with something stronger than fear. It was the beginning of courage. "Give me the papers," she said quietly. The lawyer nodded and slid the official complaint forms toward her. Lena sat up with Cassandra's help. She picked up the pen with steady fingers, even though her body still ached. She signed her name. The ink dried quickly on the paper. With that signature, she took the first step toward justice. Outside the medical room, police arrived at the compound. Their flashing lights reflected through the glass panels. Cassandra had called them minutes earlier, informing them that both Damien Holt and Roxy Vega were ready to be handed over. Silas escorted them down the hall where the officers waited. Two officers approached Damien first. His wrists were quickly secured with metal cuffs, his face twisted with anger and panic, but he did not resist. The fight had already drained out of him. Another set of officers took Roxy. She cried as they placed cuffs on her wrists, her earlier confidence completely gone. The officers led both of them out of the compound and into the waiting patrol vehicles. The doors closed with a heavy thud that echoed across the courtyard. Back inside, Nolan spoke to Cassandra in low tones while reviewing the final checklist of evidence. Silas returned to the hallway to ensure the police transport moved safely out of the compound. Everything was handled with precision. The night had been chaotic, but Cassandra's base was a world of order. Word began spreading almost immediately. Gossip networks, local blogs, anonymous posts on social media. News outlets picked up fragments and turned them into breaking stories. Millionaire arrested for assaulting pregnant wife. Graphic evidence seized in domestic abuse case. Mistress confesses in late-night raid. The entire city reacted with outrage. Public anger surged online as more details leaked. Inside the compound, Cassandra stood beside her daughter. She wrapped a blanket around Lena's shoulders. Her face softened as she said, "You are safe now." Lena looked at her mother with tired eyes and nodded. She felt the truth of those words settle into her heart. The lawyer finished compiling the evidence pack and placed it in a sealed folder. "I will submit this to the court immediately," he said. "With everything we have, the judge will not hesitate." The assembled case files, physical evidence, and digital recordings were placed into secure containers. The paperwork was finalized. The legal process was set in motion. There was no turning back now. By the time the police cars disappeared through the gates, Damien and Roxy were officially under custody. Their first night in the holding cells would begin soon. The legal system was already preparing for the case that would unfold in the days ahead. An official notification came through the lawyer's phone. He looked at it and nodded once. "The court has set the hearing date," he said. "It will be soon." Lena closed her eyes in a weary exhale. She had waited for this moment for so long. Now it felt real. She would face everything publicly. She would stand before the court. She would speak for herself and for her unborn child. Cassandra placed her arm around Lena's shoulders. "Rest for now," she said. "The fight will continue tomorrow." Lena leaned lightly against her mother, drawing comfort from her presence as the night settled around them. And far away, inside the holding cells of the police station, something darker was waiting for Damien and Roxy. Their nightmare was only beginning. The moment the police cars left Cassandra Moretti's compound, Lena's body began to react to everything she had endured. The adrenaline that had kept her moving slowly faded. A deep, burning ache spread across her back where the lashes had struck. Her legs shook as she walked, and her breathing grew unsteady. Cassandra noticed immediately and signaled the medical team on standby. Within minutes, Lena was placed back in the SUV and driven straight to the hospital. Inside the bright emergency department, nurses and doctors moved quickly around her. The harsh white lights made her squint as she was guided onto a hospital bed. Her back pulsed with sharp pain, each breath pulling at the swollen wounds. A doctor examined the marks, his expression turning serious. He ordered an immediate admission to prevent complications. The multiple lash wounds had begun to flare, and her muscles were tightening dangerously from the trauma. Lena clutched her stomach as another surge of pain radiated across her side. A nurse hurried to attach an IV line. Another prepared medication to ease her breathing. The fetal monitor was brought in and placed gently across her abdomen. Cassandra stood beside her, holding her hand firmly as the machine powered on. The room fell quiet while everyone waited for the sound that mattered most. A steady rhythm filled the room, soft but clear. The baby's heartbeat echoed like a fragile beacon. Lena released a long breath and covered her face with her hands. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not from fear this time, but from overwhelming relief. Cassandra leaned forward and pressed a hand to her daughter's shoulder. She said nothing, but the touch was enough to steady Lena's trembling heart. Security guards from the hospital began patrolling the halls after news spread that Damien Holt and Roxy Vega had been arrested. Their violent actions against a pregnant woman had already caused a public outcry. The hospital staff wanted to ensure Lena was safe from any possible retaliation. Cassandra remained by her bedside, refusing to leave even for a moment. Meanwhile, at the police station, the atmosphere was different. Damien was shoved through a set of metal doors and escorted down a narrow hallway. His hands were still cuffed, and his breathing was ragged. An officer opened the door to the holding cell and pushed him inside without hesitation. He stumbled as he entered. The door shut behind him with a hard clang. The cell was dimly lit and smelled of stale sweat and damp concrete. Several men were already inside, sitting or pacing restlessly. They turned their heads slowly when Damien entered. Their expressions shifted the moment they recognized him from the news reports circulating online. Whispers spread through the cell. "That's him," someone muttered. "The one who whipped his pregnant wife." Another man stepped forward. His stare was cold. 100 lashes, he said. "You think you're a man for doing that?" Damien tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. The men closed in around him with predatory focus. One shoved him hard against the wall. His shoulder hit the concrete, sending a jolt of pain down his arm. Another prisoner threw a punch into his stomach, forcing the air out of him. Damien doubled over. He tried to raise his hands, but the cuffs made it impossible. In the women's holding area, Roxy Vega did not fare any better. She was shoved into a cell with several other women who watched her with cold, assessing eyes. The door slammed shut behind her. Roxy turned slowly, her breathing shallow. She knew what they had heard. The news had spread across the station like wildfire. A tall woman approached her first. "You think it's funny," she said. "Hurting a pregnant woman. Laughing while she suffered." Roxy shook her head quickly. "I did not mean. I was scared," she said, her voice trembling. The woman grabbed her hair and yanked her downward. Roxy cried out, her knees hitting the cement. Another pushed her shoulder, forcing her to lose balance and fall completely to the floor. Her palms scraped against the rough surface. The mocking voices grew louder as hands shoved her back and forth. Her earlier arrogance was gone. She curled into herself, crying and pleading. Back in the men's cell, Damien tried to protect his face, but the prisoners had no intention of letting him off easily. They kicked him when he tried to stand. They cursed him when he begged. They hated men who hurt women, especially those who hurt pregnant women. The beating was not constant, but it was relentless. Every few hours, someone would shove him or grab him or remind him with a whisper that this was only the beginning of what he deserved. Days passed slowly inside the holding cells. Damien and Roxy were kept in separate blocks, but both lived through the same dread. The guards were indifferent. They had seen fights before and chose not to intervene unless absolutely necessary. Damien grew quieter with each passing day. His face darkened with bruises. His lips split. His shirt ripped across the shoulder seam. Roxy barely slept. Each time she closed her eyes, she jumped awake at the sound of footsteps. At the hospital, Lena remained under constant observation. She recovered slowly. The medication eased her pain, and the baby's heartbeat stayed steady. Cassandra stayed beside her every day. Nurses whispered about the strength Lena showed despite what she had endured. Her resilience became a point of admiration among the staff. Meanwhile, the legal team worked tirelessly. The police gathered final reports. The lawyer finalized statements. Evidence was cross-checked. Witnesses were contacted. Everything was prepared for the courtroom. The city buzzed with anticipation for the trial that would soon unfold. On the evening before the hearing, an official officer walked down the hallway of the holding cells. His footsteps echoed against the concrete walls. He stopped at Damien's cell and unlocked the door. The white hallway light spilled inside. "Get up," the officer said. "Your hearing is tomorrow morning." Damien lifted his bruised face. Fear flashed in his eyes. The officer continued down the corridor and opened the door to the women's cell. "Vega," he said, "same for you. Tomorrow morning." Roxy's breath caught in her throat. The corridor lights shone brighter than usual. Judgment was coming. The next morning arrived with a thin layer of sunlight spreading across the city. In the hospital, Lena Moretti sat upright in her bed, while a nurse removed the IV line from her arm. Her body still ached from the lash wounds, but her condition had stabilized enough for the doctor to approve a temporary discharge. She wanted to stand, She wanted to breathe fresh air. Most of all, she wanted to face the courtroom. The doctor gave her final instructions and reminded her to return immediately after the hearing. Lena nodded. There was no fear in her eyes, only resolve. Cassandra Moretti arrived moments later with Silas Grant and Nolan Pierce close behind. They helped Lena into a thick coat to shield her from the morning chill. Cassandra adjusted the collar, making sure her daughter was fully covered. A convoy of vehicles waited outside the hospital entrance. Reporters had already begun gathering near the sidewalk, sensing the importance of the day. Silence fell as Cassandra and her team helped Lena into the armored SUV. The doors closed, and the vehicle pulled into motion. As they approached the courthouse, the crowds thickened. Journalists lifted microphones and cameras, citizens gathered behind barricades. Their faces were full of outrage and disbelief. The story of the 100 lashes had ignited a wave of fury throughout the entire city. Posters and signs filled the air with messages of support for Lena and demands for justice. At the opposite end of the courthouse, a police van pulled up. Damian Holt emerged first, flanked by officers. His wrists were cuffed tightly. His face was marked by dark bruises, a split lip, and swelling under both eyes. The days spent in the holding cell had left him haggard. His shoulders slumped as the cameras flashed. His eyes darted nervously toward the crowd. The hatred in their expressions made him flinch. Another set of officers escorted Roxy Vega out of the van. She looked even worse. Her hair was tangled, her eyes swollen from crying, and her hands trembled as she stepped onto the pavement. The bruises on her arms and the cut on her forehead were reminders of the torment she had endured in the women's holding block. She looked around as if the world had turned against her, and in many ways, it had. Inside the courthouse, Lena was escorted to the witness seating area. She placed a gentle hand on her stomach, drawing strength from the steady rhythm of the child within her. Cassandra sat behind her, the unwavering force that had protected her through the darkest night of her life. The judge entered the room, and everyone rose. Once seated, the proceedings began. The prosecutor approached the podium and began presenting the evidence. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as a large screen came to life. The first video played. It was the footage taken on Damian's own phone. The whip cracked across Lena's back. Her cries echoed through the room. Gasps spread across the audience. A few people wiped tears from their eyes. The sheer brutality displayed in the clip drew an immediate silence from every corner of the courtroom. No one could look away. Picture after picture appeared. Images of Lena's injuries, photos of the abandoned house, screenshots of text messages from Roxy that revealed her role. The lawyer presented each piece in a calm, steady manner, allowing the evidence to speak for itself. Roxy was brought to the stand next. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she sat down. Her voice cracked repeatedly as she admitted everything. She described her jealousy, her cruelty, and her participation in the violent attack on Lena. She sobbed through most of her testimony, begging the court to believe she regretted it, but the damage was already done. Cassandra watched with an expression that remained cold and unreadable. Then came Damian's turn. He tried to deny responsibility. He shifted blame. He claimed he had only acted out of anger. He tried to twist the narrative, but the evidence was too overwhelming. His words fell apart under cross-examination. Each lie was dismantled, each excuse exposed. His confidence dissolved, replaced by frustrated silence. The prosecutor took the floor again. He read the charges clearly, emphasizing that violence toward a pregnant woman was among the most serious offenses recognized by the court. He detailed the risk to the unborn child and described the permanent emotional scars likely to remain. The courtroom listened without a sound. From the back row, Cassandra observed everything. Her hands were clasped together, her back straight, her eyes sharp. She did not gloat. She did not smile. She simply watched justice unfold. A medical examiner stepped forward to present his findings. He explained that the stress and physical trauma from the lashes had nearly caused fetal distress. He outlined the swelling, bruising, and risk of complications Lena had faced. His tone was neutral, but the severity of his words hung heavily in the air. Finally, Lena rose. She placed a hand on the railing to steady herself as she approached the stand. Her voice wavered at first, but her determination grew stronger as she spoke. "I want justice for my child," she said. "I want to protect the life inside me. And I want to make sure no one else goes through what I went through." Her words moved the entire courtroom. Even those who had already known her story felt the weight of her strength and vulnerability. The judge took a recess to deliberate. When he returned, the courtroom held its breath. He read the verdict with measured clarity. For the crime of severe assault on a pregnant woman and the clear intent to inflict bodily harm, Damien Holt was sentenced to 30 years in prison without the possibility of parole. A ripple moved through the room. Damien's face went pale. His knees buckled slightly as officers took him by the arms. The judge then addressed Roxy. For her role as an accomplice and for participating in the violence, she was sentenced to 15 years in prison. She broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably as she was led away. As the courtroom began to empty, Cassandra stood and placed a hand on Lena's back. They walked toward the exit together. Outside, the sunlight spilled across the steps of the courthouse. The warmth touched Lena's skin, gentle and full of promise. They returned to the hospital afterward. Lena leaned against her mother as they walked down the quiet hallway. The sound of distant monitors echoed softly. Lena felt lighter than she had in a long time. The wounds still hurt, the memories still cut deep, but justice had been delivered. She stepped into her room, inhaled slowly, and let the morning light settle on her face. A new life was waiting.